Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are, I have Baba O'Reilly stuck in my head because this volume is called Teenage Spaceland.
Teenage Spaceland, yes.
I just kept like the whole time I was reading.
Yeah.
And speaking of music, if people have not been following us on Blue Sky, half of the Hive Mind replied and showed us that there is in fact a soundtrack to go along with at least Volume 1. Curiously, there's a QR code back in the back of the complete collection for the music, and when you click that, it takes you to the soundtrack for just Volume 1. So I don't know if they ever completed the soundtrack for Volumes 2 and 3.
There is a soundtrack, I believe it's in the back of Volume 2 as well, to go along with the Party Planet rave that happens in issue 7.
Well, I mean that one writes itself.
Yeah. So, but yeah, they clearly have that kind of tie-in. They want to have people have the whatever ambient experience kind of thing with it. But yeah, it totally makes sense here. And that song, in a lot of ways, makes sense in the idea that this is a book. This volume, I think, is I really enjoy, and it actually kind of makes me. Like, I'm preemptively sad knowing there's only 4 issues left. There's only one more volume. Because I think here we get a lot of really cool setup. Because it's really all character focused. There's not a lot of, things happen. Character motivations are revealed and discovered and things like that. But it's very character focused. Because, in terms of like what actually happens, like they go to the planet with the turtles that they just basically get high on. They explore the ship in issue 6. Issue 7 is the dance party, and then issue 8 is where things really kind of happen, but they're still just on the ship pretty much, right? The ship and then the void planet, because now we've had Colstack's kind of heel turn there. So like not a lot.
I think that's
about space. Yeah.
But the book's called Joyride, right? It's not about. It's not about the destination. It's literally about the journey.
1,000%, which is why I like this here. And I like that they spend a lot of time with the kind of exploration of the characters and getting to see more of that stuff. It works really well. Again, as we've talked about, which is a small core cast. Got our 3 main characters. We got the ship, and then we have Colstack, as a...
I think you have to call Colstack a main character at this point. I mean... If you did a percentage breakdown of how many panels each character's in, he's right there with the main 3.
He's no lower than 20%, which is just shy of a quarter. So that is So there are the 4 people on the ship plus bot / the ship itself. So you can really focus on the interpersonal stuff there. And of course we get that filtered through the lens of like they're also just dumb kids.
Well, so let me just say. It's very difficult, but they've done it in this genre book. They continue to surprise me, and pleasantly so. I just absolutely love. And I couldn't help cross-pollinating universes here, but if Uma got one of the genies from 8 Billion Genies, it's like she's the one who makes the wish in the first 8 minutes. She's not holding on to it, calculating. Maybe 8 seconds.
8 seconds. I would say maybe first 8 seconds. Yeah.
But it's not, she's not the one. Like whereas, Dude, I think would be the guy who's holding on to it for 8 years, like trying to come up with the perfect language and crafting. Like, how do I get, all the things I want with just one wish? How do I wordsmith it so that there's no collateral damage?
Yeah.
And she's like, no, all those problems are going to be there. I'll have a party, please.
And you know what? Catrin is someone who knows within 8 seconds what she's going to wish for, but it probably takes her 8 weeks or 8 months to do it. She knows immediately what she wants, but she still has to work to get it. That actually is the way you frame that is hysterical, and it makes total sense for. Hopefully you've also read and listened to our 8 Billion Genies episodes.
God, but, if not, you don't even have to listen to us. Just go read it. Like that is like a cannot miss book. Just like that's just the perfect elevator pitch. And then I think the whole series worked, which is also a rare thing.
But weirdly it works, and I think I mentioned this in the Zero. I talked about there was like a dance party, like a rave party issue, and it's my favorite issue of the series. I have that one signed by Lansing Kelley and Toe. It because it's so irreverent, but it works with the characters. The idea of like when Uma is, the what, the eighth dimensional being that's a space whale that
Right.
she freed in the second issue, I think, comes back and basically grants her a wish, and her first thing is like, we're throwing an all planet rave.
Yeah.
And Katrin is all part of it is like, wait, like you had a wish and you went with that. You could have gone back and like ended the fascistic rule of my father and done all these things here. And it makes sense for someone for like Uma, who is on one hand obviously like just irresponsibly impulsive, but also her idea of like, you know what, we're gonna have a good time. Like my wish is for people to have a good time, and I think she caps it later when
She wants
when
an
she's
uncomplicated good time.
yeah, but
And I think that's the thing is like, I think if she said, she was in love with, dude, or attracted to him at all, he would be like, yeah, I'm here for a good time. I will go along with whatever because I got the thing I want. And
yeah.
so, but she is like moment to moment, which like, I have to say, everything in this arc confirmed my suspicions about Uma from the first issue, which is she is being written like a character with a secret terminal illness. And like that like, now I haven't read volume 3 yet. Like I'm coming into this, I'm doing my typical thing in the podcast is if I've read the whole series before, there's a good chance I don't remember a good bit of it anyway. But if I haven't, then I'm going to have the same experience as the listener.
Going book to book, sure,
unless
sure.
it's one of those where I just can't put it down. Because like, I think I was going book to book with the Unwritten, and when we started to like really get ahead of steam in that series, I was like, wow, I'll just read
It's not finish. Yeah. But no, I think that there's something to that. The idea that the reason that she's impulsive, and it comes down to it at the end, after the party gets raided by the cops, and the space whale kind of also confronts Umar about her choice. I mean, like, hey, you could have gone back in time. I could have saved your family, specifically your mother and your all the acolytes, all the free thinkers, your whole community. I could have saved all of that. And her response was, I have this quote here. It says, the dead are dead and their sacrifices kept me alive. They made this place possible. They made me possible. Moments like this, they matter because they end. And so that idea for her of living in the moment isn't just about living in the moment. It's about experiencing these moments because they don't last forever. So having a moment of joy, a moment of unbridled fun, which is having a planet-wide rave on whatever uninhabited planet they found, giving people that moment. The reason that's important is because at some point it's going to end, but you're going to have the memory of that great moment. It's not about having that for all time. It's not about living in an eternal party, but it's about having these moments and having these experiences, which is, I think that's something that you hear a lot about generational differences between like Gen X and millennials and things like that, about generations that acquire goods, that want things that maybe more materialistic or whatnot, versus younger generations now that are a little more ephemeral. They're searching for experiences. They want to have. They don't want to have things.
I have friends who.
Yeah.
I thought they would all grow out of it. Like I've always been an old man. Like in my 20s, my friends who like got good jobs out of college and then they went, got a nice job, made, I don't know, 70, 80 out of, and then didn't know what to do with all their money. Basically, they would save up enough money in their account and their PTO, go blow it for 3 weeks in, Japan or Europe or Australia, come back totally depleted and just work again and do that again. And I was like, right. And I was like, I guess that's fine. I was thinking already, like, oh, the compound interest of and I'm like, it's just, you're throwing away millions of dollars. Yeah. But but like I have friends that are like still 35 or something, and yeah, they got a mortgage now, but um, they still do that for the most part. They
Yeah,
still
yeah,
basically. But then again, you look at this is an audio medium, but you look at the room that I'm in. It is full of guitars, original
yeah,
comic art, comic books. It's like
yeah.
with the money I've spent on my hobbies, I easily could have just socked it all away. So we all have our things.
Or you could have not done that, not saved it, and also gone on trips or whatnot. And I think what I was alluding to there, yeah, that there is kind of a generational thing to that, and I think the mindset that someone like Uma has is I think very much in line with maybe a younger generation today, maybe our sub 30 or sub 35 set, people that are like squarely millennial, like
Well, I
hardcore,
think
like
you're like Gen Z and Gen Alpha get much more like
it,
nihilistic.
it,
Of
it,
like,
it's probably
I might as well spend it because I'm not even going to be here.
it's probably even more so as we get younger. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot of Gen Zers and all
Youths.
that. But I think, as we talked about with our 8 billion genies kind of metaphor there, I think between Uma, Duid, and Katrin, you have this kind of like three different ways of looking at the world. You know, there's Uma who is impulsive and wants to live in the moment, and that's the way she was raised and the way she understands things. And you have Duid, who is up for it, but has to have an understanding of things. As he talks about, he's a he's basically a tech guy. He's the guy that he needs to know why things work. It's why he goes exploring into the ship, because he has to understand why the ship works. He has no problem being on the ship. Finding out how the ship works isn't going to change his opinion of it, but he has that thirst for knowledge. His drive is, I want to know how this thing works so I can understand it and move forward. And then you have Katrin, who, because of her upbringing, is the most reserved. She's the most conservative. She's always looking at like, go slower. We got to think all this through. And we see those walls now obviously start to break down. That's what you get in a coming of age story, right? That's what you get with a story about teenagers, is they all have their individual boxes, and then as the story goes on, as the trip goes on, as the journey goes on, those walls start to crumble and they start to become hopefully become more fully formed humans versus just kind of single track mind kids.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So I think Katrin probably had the least progress in this one. Obviously with the initial, Love Planet, things like that, you get the Duid stuff coming to the forefront, and him getting rebuffed and yada yada. And Katrin's kind of there. She's supportive. Her relationship with Uma deepens, in surprising ways.
Well, and I think what's interesting too, well, the one thing about Katrin is you get the reveal that she's what they call an abhorrent, right? She has the pale skin, the red eyes, the white hair, which like isn't a super surprise. Again, if you go back and look at the I guess the flashback sequence in volume 1, not flashback, but when Uma and Katrin are intertwined with the alien planet and their memories meld.
Yeah.
And Katrin sees Uma's childhood and vice versa. You get a sense that Katrin is hiding something, but the reveal, it's a big reveal it's a confirmation reveal to the reader. But when she comes back out and meets up with Duid and Uma, Duid's like, oh, what's going on here? And Uma's like, yeah, that's her. Get over it. Because I guess she saw it in a reminder or whatnot. So
right.
It's a way of showing that to Uma, it's not a big deal.
Right.
And you get a sense that it probably wasn't a big deal, even if she didn't get the glimpse into Katrin's mind in the previous volume. So there's like Katrin gets the literal dropping of the mask, but we don't see the next step after that quite yet. We get it. We get the taste of it.
But it's like they knocked out all her character progress in the first half of the first issue.
Yeah, and then she stopped. And then she stopped. Yeah, so she didn't get step 1, drop the mask. Step 2, step forward into the light, kind of thing, right? And we got step 1, and then we got like a half step forward into the light, into becoming whatever, into her becoming the person you assume she's going to be. And so you get a little bit of that in the Party Planet issue and in issue 7, but then because of what happens in 8, and the actual story that goes on with Kolstad and all that, that gets kind of stunted. So I agree with you there. You got the start of something with Katrin, but you didn't get to see it in this volume of like, okay, well, now that she's comfortable enough to be her true self, what does that mean? And we didn't quite get that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's still coming, and they're playing.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
they're playing 12-issue ball now, and that's been very
Yeah.
clear since
yeah.
issue 2 or 3. That like,
But Uma and Duid do get a little more. They get progress and then action and then follow up or consequences. I mean, consequences is too harsh for it, but you know what I'm saying there. They get more progression.
there's fallout.
Yeah, that fallout. That's good there.
And like, I gotta say, the surprising thing here is that normally, so let me just say, everything I expect from this book, they subvert in a delightful way. Because normally in this series, what would happen? They would go down to a planet, they would pick up a new companion, an attractive young girl, perhaps similar looking to Uma, who's super into Duid.
Yeah.
And, they try to create like well, I didn't want him, but I don't want somebody else to have, to try to make the love triangle.
Yeah.
And it's just been done ad nauseum. Like there's nothing new to say about that story, but instead to have him get kind of mentally, intellectually abducted by, the being in their ship and kind of mind meld and find a greater sense of purpose where he's like able to push those things to the side now. He's not moping anymore. I mean,
yeah.
Not like he was like, because I thought, man, if he's just going to mope for this whole volume, I'm going to be real sick of this guy.
Well, as you said, though, that is a very standard setup, right?
A trope even.
The character who gets rejected or buffed turns inward and busies himself with some task that seems like obvious busy work.
Yes.
He's exploring the ship because he has to figure out how it is, and his rationale, as I mentioned, is he's the guy that's got to figure out what he's doing, figure out how things work. And it's clear, it seems clear that he's doing that to keep his mind off of the thing that happened on the turtle planet. And then it leads him down a path, what you say, when he connects with the ship and he finds a different purpose, a higher purpose, something else that can actually take his mind off, because his mind has been kind of rewired now into thinking about something else. So yeah, it starts off in the very standard, very tropic way, and then takes a left turn, and allows him to step into another role that obviously we'll see going forward. He doesn't quite get to it. In this volume, but you do see Uma do that too, because ultimately, the end of this, we can jump to the end here and work our way back, but obviously in the end, she makes a sacrifice to be with that bomb, and kind of goes back to on the Party Planet when Katrin gives her some kind of pep talk of like, listen, like you're the captain of the ship now, which comes with like, a level of general unease and responsibility. And I think Uma kind of blows it off initially because they're at a giant a planet-wide rave. But in that moment, when someone needs to step up, she does that, almost like she feels compelled to sacrifice for her friends. And I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler to be like, you know what, probably not dead.
Right.
but our characters in the story don't know.
Can you imagine though if they? And honestly, I did have to ask myself, like, well, they have subverted me several times now. Would they actually kill a main character with 4 issues left?
I think, again, the fact that it ends with her, like you still see her body in some form, that she's not out of the story there. But no, it would, I don't want to say it'd be fitting, but it would be in line with the tone of and I mean, not the tone, because it would be pretty dark for a book called Joyride. But in the coming of age kind of thing, it would make more sense, I guess, if Uma made this sacrifice and comes back but isn't like the same Uma, right? If she's like ascended to some other plane, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that would make a little more sense. Because for her, it's about it's the decision to make the sacrifice. That's her character journey. For Do It, it's about finding this path and whatever this new path is, and then ultimately following through on that, which you assume is coming next volume. And as we mentioned, then you have Catherine, who has come to a level of acceptance about who she is, but we haven't seen what her path forward is. We don't know what she's going to do with that. We don't know what that's going to drive her to do going forward. But one would assume, if you're a consumer of stories, that, oh, she's the daughter of the fascistic leader of the planet, that maybe her path leads her back to face that. I don't think that's a wildly out of pocket theory in terms of where she might go, but that hasn't been set up in any way yet. That's all speculation if you haven't read anything ahead. So, but that seems like the kind of path she could go down, or she could peace out entirely, based on Uma's sacrifice. She could become driven to find Uma and reconnect and all that. So there are ways that Catra can go because they haven't set up what her path forward is yet.
Yes. Oh boy, what next? I mean, a lot of stuff in 4 issues, and it's not a dense book. Like, no, this is a very quick, easy read.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, can we talk about the paneling? I mean, well, let's talk about Marcus Toe for just a minute anyway.
Yeah, Marcus Toe and
just
Irma
imagine
Kniivila. Yeah,
getting the script of Sky Makes Love to Planet. I would love to read that page of the script. Yeah. Like, I say that all the time because I am just like, how much do they say to Marcus Toe? Just go nuts, or were they like describing this thing in vivid detail? I think either approach is great, but
it works. It works. And then I mentioned before that Marcus Toe, from this book, I had seen his work before, but I didn't know who he was. This book was the one that solidified the artist with the style, to where now I can recognize his stuff, and when I see it, I pick it up. I want to read it because I want to see it. I absolutely love his art style. I think he's incredible with faces and expressions. And I think he does, you mentioned the paneling real quick there. I think here in this volume, he gets to do some really cool stuff to break them all. There are plenty of pages that are, standard 3-4 panels, maybe an inset panel or something like that. But obviously the first issue 5, the first issue of this volume, like, they're on a planet that basically drugs them and gets them high. So you have, and also in terms of the colors that are used here, Irma Kniivila has that to do and gets to really have fun with that. They have a planet-wide rave with an 8th dimensional space whale. So you can get all kinds of crazy colors and kind of effects going there. And there's kind of so much going on. I'm sorry, I skipped the paneling. I want to go back to that. Specifically when they're going through the ship, which is in issue 6, as Uma, Catherine, and Bot and Kolstak are walking the ship, like, doing things where all of a sudden, like, they're upside down, but you get kind of the DeLuca effect of the characters moving through space, kind of without panels. Getting some big, great splash pages specifically in issue 7 with the planet-wide rave. There's just a lot of room, I think, that they've given Marcus Toe to play with the page or pages.
And then you get my favorite, like, as soon as issue 6 opens, you get 2 back-to-back 9 grids.
Yeah.
I love a 9-panel grid. To me, it's like snappy, punchy. It conveys, like, if Aaron Sorkin ever wrote a comic, it would be all 9 panels, right? It would just be back, forth, interrupting, like, just lots of fast-paced conversation. And then something I've never seen, I don't think I've never clocked before, but the 10-panel grid breaks and it's an implicit 10-panel, because it is Korsak and Duid talking, but it cuts back and forth between them being observed from the outside and them being observed by the like, what do you want to call it? The void entity.
The void. Yeah.
I have to be really careful with that because Thunderbolts is out, and the void means something different now.
Oh no, that's the no that that. Oh yeah, it's 10 panel, but it's 9 panels. It's 8 panels, and then
correct.
Is that the picture you're talking about?
Yes,
Yes, yeah.
there's the implicit line between them still at the bottom, but yeah, it was a very cool visual break from the 9 panel while still keeping that pace. And I just that's where I just have to. I always wonder some writers really say like there's 9 panels done exactly like this. There's 8 panels laid out like this. And with 2 writers, I can't imagine that they wouldn't get kind of specific with paneling, but you never know.
But I think,
and when you find an artist, you might just say, here's what we need to convey, get it across.
I think what's interesting about specifically this issue is you mentioned that the issue starts really with Dewitt's perspective, right? He's working through the ship, and so there's something very systematic about it, and those first 2 pages of 9 panel grids each. And then as you move through the middle into that, as they delve deeper, as the rest of the crew goes after searching for Dewitt, and they delve deeper into the ship, you start getting less and less paneling. You start getting kind of the bleed around pages. You get the big splash pages, or the mostly full splash pages with some inset panels, right? As you get them meeting the ship and all that. And then as they start coming out of that, you start getting more structure again, more paneling, until the final page, which is when you start seeing that maybe Kolchak isn't exactly who he says he is, and the final page is back to a 9 panel grid. You get back to that very specific structure. And something about this tells me that if it wasn't specific in terms of exactly how many panels, that feels like a very specific instruction for how to construct a story, about having a very rigid paneling, moving into a very open, loose paneling interpretation, moving back to and ending on a very rigid paneling. That feels like a shape of how the arc goes as they delve into the ship and discover more about it and more about the void entry, and then work their way back out with a new understanding. That kind of stuff, it feels intentional to me in that issue.
Yes. Yeah. I just love it. I love not just that perspective, but you also get the little horror element of their being watched.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
you don't know if it's good or bad.
Right. But then the immediate payoff of like a huge spider-like thing jumping out at them. And Kolchak is scared, right? It's like he's our seasoned space traveler, right? He's seen all the different entities. In fact, this one in particular, he's familiar with. And so when his reaction is, "Gah!" Like, oh, it's bad. It's bad watching.
And I think especially as you're right, he was actually looking for this. This is the thing he's trying to get to.
And still surprised.
Yeah, and exactly. And so when you look back on it, you're like, oh yeah, this thing is that frightening. He was not prepared, even though in a way he was prepared. The thing is that frightening. It's still that scary. So,
So can we talk about his character? Because
sure,
when he enters the story, he certainly enters like a villain, right?
Yes.
It doesn't help that he looks a little like Greedo, and that he's pointing a gun at our protagonist in a cantina, I'll call it. And it's like, okay, this definitely seems like a villain. But then he's the one reuniting the band at the end of Volume 1.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't have, maybe you can help me with this, it doesn't have direct bearing on his evil plan. Like, it should not matter to him whether they get back together or not, which I take to mean he's complicated.
The only thing I can think of is he specifically needs Dewitt because Dewitt is the tech guy. He needs him to explore the ship to find the thing that he needs.
Yeah, I buy that.
That is the only thing I can think, because I'm with you. He wanted the ship ultimately, like he wanted the things that our 3 kids got, and he feels that they stole from him. So he kind of found a way to stow away and tag along with. So yeah, why does he need that? And the only thing I can think of is that he doesn't know the ship. He knows it's here, or knows he can get to it, or something like that. And so I think maybe that's we see him. I think when you look back on it in that issue 6, he's tailing Dewitt, which is why he comes across him, right?
Yeah.
And under the guise of like, hey, checking up on you, making sure you're okay, something like that. But I think maybe you're supposed to read that as him tailing him as Dewitt makes his way deeper into the ship to discover more about it. So Kolstad can find the thing that he needs by letting Dewitt do it forward. That's the only thing I can think of. That's the only thing I can think of. Because otherwise there's no reason to be like, no. I'm kind of working through it in real time now.
Yeah,
well,
No,
otherwise, there's no reason other than to just stay in the good graces of everyone on the crew, because maybe if he feels he doesn't, no matter what happens, it's 3 against 1 or 2 against 1, whoever's left.
Yeah,
He's outnumbered anyway. Although I guess in that case, the scene you're talking about, both Dewitt and Catrin have been captured, so it's really just him and Uma in the ship. So
well, and
that's a 1v1 situation.
It's 1v1, but it is a potentially reckless, potentially suicidal, like go out in a blaze of glory one that he's left with, and he doesn't. Yeah. Right, he's like, without the others here, Uma's going to get us killed.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah,
I mean, I do think
I'll lose
that.
the ship. I'll lose my chance. That could be. I think.
That said, I do still get the vibe that he cares about them. I think it's that kind of story. I think he's kind of like Drax the Destroyer in Guardians 1, where he's like, yeah, I'm genuinely allied with these you guys, but if I get a shot at Ronan, I'm calling him here. I'm gonna confront this guy and I'm gonna cut his head off. And it's like, how could you be so stupid? How could you like gamble everything else for the shot at the one thing? And he's like, because I told you I'm on a revenge quest. Like, I'm with you guys as long as it doesn't interfere with my revenge quest.
And I think that's true, because when you get to 8 and when they realize the ship is gone and they have to go after him, and when the other wanderers show up, like the lady with the cat ears and all that, and we get some of his backstory. When they show up on the planet, he's pointing the gun. I'm looking at the page on. He's pointing the gun at Catrin and says, you should have stayed on the party planet, princess, implying that like you guys shouldn't be here, and that I didn't want you guys here, which may not be fully saying he cares about them, but he's not actively out to hurt them, I guess, which maybe ultimately means the same thing.
Right.
He wasn't trying to put them in specific harm's way. They have now gotten in his way, and he will not, he is now fine with taking them out if they interfere, but he had no problem leaving them on the party planet so I can do my thing. His betrayal was meant to be ditching them and getting the thing he needs done. His betrayal wasn't turning on them actively and getting them hurt. So I agree with you. I think there is a level of, I don't know if maybe saying he likes them or cares for them may be a little too much, but he's not looking to actively hurt them unless they get in the way, unless they interfere, which they obviously do.
Which I think, and that was my comp for like, if Drax weren't just a silly character, which is kind of how they played him in the Guardians movies, but if it was a little closer to comics Drax, then I think it would be like, this guy's motivated by killing Ronan, but ultimately, you get it, his last line at the end of the movie, it's like, so you must be satisfied now, what are you going to do? He's like, yeah, sure, but it's really Thanos I should be killing.
Thanos got to kill. Yeah. But I think there is, and I guess when I talk about this idea of like at the end of this volume, like we kind of get a sudden surge of story momentum.
Yeah.
So I think story wise, I don't say there's a pacing issue there, but you do kind of have these 3, I don't want to say like chill issues, because obviously you have the initial horror thing you mentioned of like the void entity, the spider-like thing in the ship in issue 6. But here, you start getting, when you get the history of Kolstad and the set of the things he sets in motion with the bomb and all that in the ship and leads to Uma's sacrifice and things like that, you get this setup of like, okay, now it's like this is starting to get real now for the kids.
Right.
Up until
yeah,
this point, it hadn't been real. The
which is crazy
searching
because
the
after
ship,
being kidnapped, it should be real enough. But
well,
you
it
know,
should be, yeah. Well, but like the issue 6, it felt like it was getting real, right? Until Dewitt comes out and he's like, wait, no, 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 no. It's actually okay. This thing isn't trying to hurt us. It wants to help us. It wants us here, So I think for someone like Uma, you're like, oh, well, then it's fine. She can brush it off. It seemed like we were in danger. It seemed like a bad thing. But it turned out okay. And so thus I didn't learn any lessons. It's that kind of
which
juvenile
is
thinking.
they're teenagers, right? It's like
No,
if they learn too many lessons, it's not believable.
it makes sense here. It makes sense to the character. So you get to 8, and this is when they are making what we'll call, for lack of a better term, adult decisions about themselves, about the group, about their future, whatever it is. They're thinking beyond the next moment. They're thinking about anything. And so this is where the ball starts rolling about them growing up on this trip and what they might actually learn about themselves or about the world through jetting off into space. And you get that taste of it, and then the volume ends because it happens in issue 8. And then you got to, whatever resolution, whatever continued path, you got to wait until the next volume.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a complicated book for being a really straightforward, simple book. I mean,
yeah.
like really intricate plotting, pacing, very deliberate reveals, and like ultimately some pretty trippy stuff too. Like it's almost on the edge of sci-fi fantasy.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Yeah.
Because, first of all, not enough people do cosmic 8-dimensional whales. But also like the mind melding in the first one. And my favorite page in this one is probably issue 6, I would say. It's where she says, check it out. I think this whirlpool isn't so much a whirlpool as it is a door. And
yes. Yeah.
Coolest page.
With them, with what we have here, we have Kolstad and Bot on the top of the whirlpool.
Yeah.
You have Uma on the other side, upside down, and Catrin is in the process of traveling between the two of them. Yeah, that's a super, super cool page. And that's what I talked about, how in that issue, that's in the middle there where the paneling is like, there's basically none. Like that's a splash page that's got 2 kind of close-up insert panels. One basically on top of the whirlpool or the doorway, and one on the other side, top and bottom,
Right.
So you get that kind of contrast there versus like a highly structured grid pattern, whether it's 9 or 4 or 6 or whatever it is. You just get this beautiful splash page and these kind of interstitials. But yeah, I think there is, I think the reason I like this volume so much is I like the character study, even though they are kids, and I generally find teenagers annoying because I'm old. But I think this is a good exploration about, again, as we talked about, the archetypal nature or the tropic nature of the kids on bike stories. Going out and having an adventure and learning something about yourself and about life. And because our cast here is so small, it's just, in terms of the coming of age story, it's just the 3 of them, right? So, at this point we can drop off Bot and we can drop off Kolstad because they are they're part of the story cast, but in terms of our kids coming of age and discovering things about themselves, about who they are and what their place maybe is in the world, it's just the 3 of them. And so you get a good dynamic. And something I mentioned last week about how those issues went out of their way to pair up the 3 of them in different combinations, using either Bot or Kolstad as another person there, but putting them together in different combinations so you see what the interactions are, and then playing off of that in this volume here, seeing, again, starting with the turtle planet where everyone kind of gets high on the pheromones and seeing what the fallout is of that, going into Dewitt being allegedly kidnapped by the ship and seeing that's okay, and seeing how that affects Uma, going into the all planet rave and seeing how Uma and Catrin react to the party versus what Dewitt is, into issue 8 when everyone's in peril and the end result is Uma sacrificing for her friends.
Right.
So having all those character beats and seeing how each one of those play off of and build off of each other and seeing growth that way, just in how they interact and relate to each other, leading to that final moment. That is what I enjoy about this book. That's what I go back to. Like we had this whole volume here, and the idea that Earth is surrounded by or ruled by a fascistic government that's blocked off from the rest of the universe, like that didn't even come up really.
No, aside from like they kind of get made fun of, which I do like that.
Well, also
like, you guys
actually,
had one taste of this, and you walled off your sky.
Yeah. They get dunked on there. We don't go back to like we're not revisiting. We're not
right. There's no one stuck under that sky that we care about.
Yeah. Versus in the first volume, when not that we care about them, but because they introduced Dewitt's brother and as a show of kind of the dichotomy of the two brothers, we actually got POV from someone not on the ship. You know, those few pages jumping back to Dewitt's brother and his unit or squadron, whatever it is, as they meet up with them. We get very little of that here. Although I did want to mention, because I have it in my notes here and I kind of skipped past it. I mentioned, that when the party planet gets broken up by the cops, it's so the galactic regulators are so Star Trek coded. They're not even trying to hide it in terms of if you look at what their uniforms are for the cops and then what their ship looks like, it's so Star Trek coded, which is then funny to go on and realize that Lanzing and Kelley would go on to like be the main architects of the current Star Trek comics.
Right. That is a good one. I mean, well, that yes, yeah. Like I had definitely had the reaction of like, you can't put a Star Trek uniform on someone and give them a red shirt and not expect me to expect them to die.
Well, and you can't put a ship like that has this ridiculously large forward hull, like a slim neck back, and then like thin engines in the back. This has 3, but like that's the Enterprise. Like that's every starship vehicle.
Right.
Like I would have to imagine
that when I do want to see the script. The script said, "Get as close to the Enterprise as you can without us getting sued."
Yeah,
like, we want to be able to finish the series.
Their uniforms are Star Trek-esque. It's Galaxy Quest. They just put Galaxy Quest in here in terms of what the uniforms look like. Again, with the two-tone colors, very big, wide bands, the small little gold insignia on the left breast there. But yeah, it is no doubt they're like, this is the Galactic Police. They're the Federation. They're Starfleet. And again, to spin that forward 5-6 years and to realize that Lanzing and Kelley are now in charge basically or part of the main creative teams that drive Star Trek stories in the comics is very, very funny. I doubt this was what got them like, hey, here's this book where Starfleet are the annoying cops that break up the fun party. That probably wasn't what got them the job. I'm sure they had other things they submitted to IDW to get that work, but to see that now, knowing where their career is going to go, is really funny, and I did enjoy that.
Yeah, very cool. And I will say, if that was the note to Marcus, admirably done.
Oh, yeah. Because
but also, by the way, when that big splash page that I just went back over to my other screen where I have the comic up digitally, that unleashes like a whole series of splash pages that are incredible.
Yes.
The alien entity language interacting with Dewitt. But you see that Dewitt's face is calm. He's like, and occasionally, the lettering gets red to convey the anger, which I think is a great choice by the letterer. It would be so lame if you had like, here's the alien character, and we're gonna add like an English exclamation mark or something to emphasize that he's frustrated. Like that's just dumb.
That's easy. It's easy.
Well, it's infantilizing to the reader and lazy by the letterer. And then you get the double page special when you see the size of this thing.
You see the whole thing laid out. Yeah.
Yeah. My gosh, it's just gorgeous art. Um, and
Actually,
then
speaking of lettering, the space whale with the
yes, yeah,
wavy all lowercase lettering with the wavy bubbles that have like the iridescent kind of rainbow
yeah.
coloring there, matching the
I
color
mean, it
of
makes him
or
seem so friendly,
yeah. Well,
but also you hear that, right? Like you can hear the big ethereal sound.
well, when he comes back, it's a big giant word cloud that says, "What's up, you guys? I'm back." And like you read it like that,
Yeah,
you see that and you read it like you're a Toto the Rad Surfer dude from Southern California in the 80s, like you read that like Keanu Reeves in Point Break.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
But yeah, just from that, you get how it's supposed to sound. And also you get what his attitude is because the more he speaks and the way he's talking with them, this eighth dimensional space whale is like wildly sarcastic,
Oh yeah.
He doesn't
I
speak
totally
like
dig
an all powerful.
this dude's attitude. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So he doesn't. He's an all powerful eighth dimensional entity, but no, like he just kind of talks a little bit like a snotty jerk, super sarcastic, kind of dunking on everybody when he can because he is an all powerful eighth dimensional entity. But yeah, you get all that just from seeing just from seeing his dialogue, and when you read it, you can't help but put your mindset into some kind of voice,
Right.
that seems that seems to be at odds with what the character actually is, but it works so perfectly. And yeah, it's perfect for that character, especially later at the end of that issue when it gets all serious with Uma.
Yes,
And so you have to reconcile the like good time sarcastic party dude entity with the like, hey, you had a choice to do this. The quote I went to earlier about she could have gone back in time and saved your parents and all that stuff. There, I don't want to say it's menacing, but once you understand what the power of this being is, there is a level of menace or danger there or kind of gravitas to it. When someone that's kind of over the top ridiculous gets real serious, you now know that it's real, that it's time to be serious, and that's something you can just do, and you can get the voice right just by how you visually represent the letters, the way it speaks.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, I mean, I'm getting near the end of my notes without starting because full disclosure. So it is true I've not finished volume 3, but I have started reading it, and
You started skipping through it. Yeah.
I'm eager. So I guess your big open questions like that we end with. Well, first of all, like just out there for anyone to answer. Does anyone have a fantasy of a big bird man, like a ripped bird man?
I'm sure someone does.
Because it was said yeah, like obviously you're gonna want the big bird, big sexy bird. They're like, didn't you tell me once that you wanted to make out with a hunky bird man? It's like, first of all, like, how long have they known each other? Like, oh, didn't you tell me once? Wouldn't it be in the last week?
No. Well, first off, that was somewhere in volume 1. Uma does say,
really?
Yeah. Uma does say that. I didn't go back.
Good.
I didn't go back and my notes. I don't find the actual issue, but she does mention that she wants to find a big hunky birdman to make out with.
And we get to keep our family friendly rating while still saying, go pluck that bird.
Yeah.
I'm going to gobble him up.
Yeah.
And that look on her face is like, yeah. And then she like the like a pulp romance novel cover of her holding the bird.
Yeah.
And that's the same page as the Enterprise.
It's kind of the VE Day kind of pose,
Yes. Yeah.
In Times Square. But yeah, so you were saying at the end here, kind of open questions, and so they leave Kolsak behind. Uma has bonded with the ship as it goes and explodes, and then we have Dewitt and Catrin are with the other the other wanderer lady, the other person that was in the order with Kolstad. I can't remember her name. The cat lady. I can't remember her name right now. But they fly off as they watch the ship explode, and of course it ends with that full plate splash of Uma in a, I mean, she's in the Christ pose,
Right.
surrounded by Technicolor light, and it says to be continued at the bottom there. So you assume that some sort of transformation comes back. But I guess what are you expecting, or what are the things you expect to see going forward in terms of what these characters do? Would you expect them to, and by them, I guess specifically mean do it in character. Would you expect them to split up and start going on their own journeys? Because the way I recall it is when I was reading it, that's the kind of thing that happens in these stories, right? The party breaks, this group that goes on an adventure together, learning lessons, the party breaks, it fractures. Everyone has to go on their own journey and then eventually comes back. And it feels like they've kind of set that up with Duid, and obviously with Uma making her sacrifice. So is that the kind of thing you had in your mind? Or did you think they would you expect them to stick together and continue on some sort of journey?
If it were a 30, 40 issue thing, I would say the next trade they're split up, knowing the ending, that it's only 12 issues, which you may not have known back in single issue.
Well, and that is a very good question I do wonder on. So,
once it went past 4, obviously, I could see them rebranding it as a 12 issue maxi series,
or just an ongoing series until it ends. And so, I do wonder, and that's something we'll track next week about as we're reading those issues. At what point do we feel like they start making a turn towards wrapping it up? Because there are points in the stories now where you can tell that, oh, maybe this could have gone to the left here and kept going, but because they know they're ending, they turn the story to the right now, and they're start going towards wrapping up towards an ending. So, well, that's something we'll track next week in terms of where we think it would have shifted. But you think if it was a series that, whether or not they knew it was going to go more than 12, but it was a longer series, you would split the party and track all of our characters separately for them to ultimately come back before.
Yeah, and you probably can guess this. That would piss me off.
Yeah, that probably would. Yeah,
that would feel like filler to me.
Yeah,
Even if they do profound things, it would feel like, look, you're deviating from the original purpose. The original purpose was the trio on a joyride, and now we've splintered into this potentially endless series. So I mean, I love a self-contained series that sticks to the original premise.
Yeah, but now that you know this is 12 issues here, if they spent issue 9 separated, and that one issue is them, you pick up later, there's maybe a time difference on that. If the story were constructed something like that, would that be something that you if it was just one issue where after this giant cataclysm, this giant issue 8 ends, this giant huge kind of traumatic experience watching Uma blow up, and you Katrin and Duid assume she's dead, and it starts off with them split up, and then by the end of the issue they've come back together, and then the final arc is them back together as a group.
That's a fairly common way. I think I would be fine with,
right? If it were one issue.
Yeah,
that wouldn't bother me.
But what would bother me is if they went like Descender Volume 3 on us, where it's like, all right, now we're going to do one issue each on each character's backstory.
Each backstory,
we don't need it. Not in this story. We don't need it.
Yeah.
It's debatable whether we needed it in Descender, because we kind of picked up what we needed about the characters as we went.
Yeah, if I remember back, I think in Descender it was cool, it's interesting, but it wasn't necessary. I think that's where we landed,
especially for the size. It was like 30 issues, and it was like,
well, that was 1/6 of the story. Yeah,
right.
It was one, yeah. It's cool, but it wasn't.
I bumped on that on the last reread that we.
Yeah.
When we were discussing it.
Yeah.
I was just like, we're pausing already to go backward. We were just starting to make some headway. So yeah, I could deal with the one issue interlude. That's the type of thing that I prefer. Like an oversized special or an annual. I know you don't do annuals on this type of series, but or even if you were doing that as like backup matter, like you did 4 or 5 pages.
Sure. Yeah. Like here's our 25-page story, and then here's an 8-page short story in the back, like bonus stuff. Yeah, that kind of thing. So where for you, from your perspective, it doesn't feel like it's part of the quote unquote main story,
Right.
right?
Like on a reread, you wouldn't have to sit through that again.
Unless you wanted to.
Unless you wanted to, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like as I'm just now on the recommendation of you and several others. I am rewatching, or I'm watching Andor for the first time ever, and I finished episode 3. And on episode 3, I was like, okay, well, this was like a really great episode, and this like episodes 1 and 2, almost nothing happens, and I don't really care about any of them. But
So
by issue 3 or episode 3, I was like, okay, that was really good. However, I was annoyed even on the first watch of all the intercuts of him as a boy being rescued off the ship. I'm like,
so
I would skip this 100% if I could.
you're not wrong. And there's a reason why when Andor season 1 dropped, they dropped all 3 of those episodes on the same day.
Yeah, it's like
So you know, season 2 that just dropped, they did it in 4-3 issue. I keep saying issues.
I know we're comic guys. It's not our fault.
But they dropped them in 4-3 episode chunks. For season 1, they dropped those first 3 together because I think they knew you got to get through that, and then from there it was weekly. But I'm glad you're watching that. That's fantastic there. But I'm with you though. The backstory stuff that doesn't feel like filler, but it feels like extra fluff that you don't quite need. But for comics, I mean, for me, like I always love that stuff, and it's only in hindsight, like something with Descender. Like I love those stories; they're really cool. It's really interesting. You don't need to read that when you're reading the narrative, you know?
Right.
So is there another way to do that? And there are series that have done things like that. I think of something like, I don't know why the first that come to mind are like The Wicked and the Divine or The Sixth Gun, where they do these mini series like, you know, Wicked and Divine : 1876 or something like that, you know, where it's not, it forces your reader though to follow like a different series though, and so there's an economy to just put it all the material under one banner so no one misses anything. So I can understand it from a creator standpoint, but I also understand it from a standpoint like of a reader like you who's like, I want the main narrative, and I want you to make the other stuff as well, but you want the option to read the additional stuff versus.
Yes, I want to opt into
narrative.
that stuff. And,
yeah.
And again, for me, it's mostly about the reread. It's like, I want to know when, you know, I go to reread this, I'm not going to have to read like, oh, that was kind of nice side quest filler stuff. That I can just go straight into what matters. It's, you know, for the same reason I would love to watch the Topher Grace cut of the Star Wars prequels, because he turned all 3 of them into 85 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, I think between those 3 movies, there's 85 minutes of stuff I want to see. Like if I were to sit down and rewatch the prequels, I'm like, I bet there's a total of 85 minutes of stuff worth watching. And most of it has Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, probably so. So, but yeah, you know, but with Joyride being 12 issues, they don't really have the luxury of doing that. And I don't think there's a lot of excess stuff. And I think in the first 8 so far, I think we haven't had anything like that. So I don't, that's really an issue here. I think as we're probably more hypothetical of if this were hypothetical, like 30 issues, like Paper Girls was or something like that. And they did the kind of split the party thing, which Paper Girls kind of does too. They send our characters, they send them off into different timelines for an arc there, but they tell those stories concurrently. So there are ways to do it, I think. But yeah, we know with a book like this that has such a quick turnaround, only in 12 issues, knowing that we only have 4 issues left in the story, and there's got to be some sort of resolution here. There's a lot of that. There's much more of a cliffhanger here at the end of volume 2 than there was at the end of volume 1. You know, I think as we mentioned at the end of volume 1, if that had been the ending, and the ending was like, okay, we are now in control of this spaceship and we're all on board with traveling through space and further adventures await, and if we never see them, the book theoretically could have ended there. The story could have ended there. and you understand that they're going to go off and leave the terrible Earth and explore the galaxy. You can't end the story after 8 issues. You can't end on that. That can't be the last thing you do.
No,
you could do it. I think that's bad storytelling.
it's not. I mean, it would
not
be
bad,
a choice. Like, yeah, I think there are maybe 3 panels they would change if that was a series wrap, and you would just leave it as a very artsy existential ending. Where you really have to bring the meaning yourself, and you have to say, what do I know about these characters? Where do I think it's going to go? And it's great for headcanon.
I guess, like, I don't know. There's no, like, so at the end of 1, there is resolution to the story of that volume, which is them escaping Earth, getting a ship, and also kind of convincing both Katrin and Do It in some sense of, like, we need to be doing this. We need to go out and explore. And at the end of that first volume, everyone is on board with the direction of, we're going to leave her and explore the galaxy. And so there's not resolution to their story, but there's resolution on the narrative. Here, there is no resolution. Like, Do It believes he's on a path to something, but we don't know what that is. Katrin has no path forward. And so I think the story it couldn't have ended after 8 if this was going to be what 8 was. You get to end of 4 and it could have stopped. You get to 8 and there has to be at least one more arc. You have to have, there is some momentum there now of you have to have some resolution, because I think it's more than like 8, like a few panels here and there if they had to change, if they were going to end on this kind of note.
Well, and let me say, one pet peeve of mine that they have violated, and I call it a pet peeve very intentionally because it is my personal take. It is not an actual rule of storytelling or a flaw, but I hate that as soon as Do It finds purpose, we get blocked out of his head. Because I'm like, I've had to listen to him spew his thoughts and emotions for like 6-7 issues, and then as soon as he has something interesting, they're like, it's a secret. And I'm like, just don't do this to me. To me, it's what always happens in mystery novels, Sherlock Holmes included, where you're listening to all of their thinking and machinations the whole book long, and then at the end they're like,
the important stuff.
Then they're like, and then he figured it out, and they set up a big Agatha Christie reveal, and you have to wait 3 more chapters to figure out what the character. And it's like, the worst example of that, like, I checked out on them, was the Robert Galbraith books, which are just like the size of the Bible, and they're mostly like the 2 characters pining after one another, and occasionally get around to the mystery, and like the ratio is getting worse and worse. Plus, people, myself included, started to feel very conflicted about giving money to J.K. Rowling, but that's another issue entirely.
I'm
glad to say that I have 2 reasons for bailing on that series, like both the story and the author.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's only so much you can do with that kind of storytelling. I think, I don't want to throw aspersions on anybody as a writer, but yet that it's tough to do. You're right, 'cause like you said, like that's such a story construct from the most classic of books and stories and writers. So to say that it takes only an exceptional writer to do that in a way where you aren't withholding information solely for storytelling's sake,
right?
Like the only reason you're not telling the audience here is because you want to tell them later, versus, well, what happens to your story if you tell them now? If it ruins your story, then maybe your story isn't that good. And that seems harsh, but it's
but that's
thing,
always
right?
my thing with time things too. When people scramble the timeline of a story to make it interesting, and I'm like, but if I put all the events in chronological order, it should still be an interesting story. Yes, otherwise, it's not interesting because you scrambled the timeline and you screwed with the reveal. That way.
The start in media res and jump back. If the only reason you do that is so you have an exciting thing in the front, but you don't gain any new perspective when you go through it linearly, for me, that trope only works if the reason you start in media res is so you can get a different perspective when you hit that in the linear timeline.
Yeah.
Versus just, oh, here's a shocking thing that happens, and how do they get there? We'll find out. And if it's just them getting there through like plot armor, then that is wildly less interesting to me.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
And there are authors I love who I think maybe go to that well a little too often.
Authors, writers, creators, anything like that use that.
I also
a lot.
think it's maybe an editor thing. I think there are editors who are like, okay, I like the story, but what if we, switch it around a little bit so that the big reveal is actually the thing in the middle? Because it's a big Christopher Nolan thing too. Christopher Nolan always draws that big loop, and he's like, that's the end of the story, and it's the middle of the loop.
Yeah.
He's like, because there's, we're cutting back and forth between past and present, and they both converge in this climax. And if you can do it like Chris Nolan, then do it.
Yeah, but it could also be a crutch of like, the story isn't very good, so we have to cut it up. So it could be editor going the other way, being like, this is the only way this is even remotely interesting. So
yeah. Cool. Well, that is all I have for this week. I'm very excited for the conclusion next week, and we're really hoping to get some of the Hive Mind or maybe Marcus Toe on to talk about this book a little bit with us. So
we would love to discuss there. There's some. I think we have a lot of questions about just creation and how they work together and what went into this story, especially being such an early work in their careers. I think we would love to speak to them about it.
Yeah. And I know you have in person, but what I want is to have that myself and also be able to share it with people and let them talk and glow a little bit about this book. And I'm very curious what it looks like in hindsight now, what their process looks like now. Because this was a big, early project for the Hive Mind. And I always find writing collaborations to be, fascinating, whether it was, Erica Schultz and what's his name on
Van Jensen
on Bylines and Blood. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't really understand, like, who writes what? How do you divide these things? They've got to come up with their own process. Or Golgotha Motor Mountain. That was the other one.
I think also there is some perspective of, as we talked about some in, I think, both last week and in the Zero, the idea that some of the themes and setup of this book are now more relevant today than they were when the book came out initially. And again, and not in the good way. So how do they look at it now, seeing at kind of the world they created and some of the issues that those characters, those young people specifically, are dealing with, how that plays, how that reads now versus how it read back then. And I think there's a lot of, again, interesting in the negative way in terms of how that parallels society right now. So all that stuff would be fascinating.
Yeah. So anyway, find us on Blue Sky. You can keep joining in the conversation there, including with the creators who are responding to us, retweeting us every week. I love how I use retweeting for Blue Sky, but you can't use it on its original platform anymore.
Yeah.
They might as well take the word.
Yeah, exactly. Might as well steal it.
So anyway, find us there. Links in bio. And we'll see you here next week for Volume 3.